His back ached, weighed down by his books and the responsibilities he bore for his family. Over a year had passed since the sudden death of his father, yet the repercussions of the loss continued to shadow their lives. When he opened the door to their small apartment, a familiar scent of rice and canned vegetables, prepared by his mother, filled the air. It wasn't much, but it was home. Ethan forced a smile as he entered, greeted by the enthusiastic voice of his 14-year-old brother, Caleb. "Hey Ethan, you're late again," Caleb said, hunched over his homework spread across the small kitchen table. "I thought your shift ended earlier today." "I stayed a bit longer," Ethan replied, setting down his bag. "How about you? Did you finish your math homework?" "Almost. It's easy," Caleb said with a hint of pride. Their mother, Grace, then appeared. Her movements were slow and deliberate, betraying a fatigue she tried to conceal. Ethan immediately noticed the paleness of her face and the faint tremor in her hands. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, stepping closer. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she replied with a weak smile. "Don't worry about me." But Ethan knew it wasn't true. Grace's health had been deteriorating for years, worsened by stress and the lack of money for proper medical care. Yet she continued to hide her struggles to protect her sons. As they shared a simple meal, Ethan couldn't help but think of the overdue bills stacked on the counter and the crushing weight of the sacrifices he was willing to make for his family. Grace slowly left the cramped kitchenette, a dish towel in hand, her tired smile masking her determination not to show weakness. Ethan watched the dark circles under her eyes and the slight unsteadiness in her step. His heart tightened. "Mom, you should rest." "I can handle the rest," he said gently. Grace shook her head, a blend of tenderness and determination in her gaze. "You're already doing too much, Ethan. I can't just sit around doing nothing. It's just a little fatigue." But Ethan knew it wasn't just fatigue. The diabetes medications, the consultations she constantly delayed due to lack of funds, and the sleepless nights spent worrying about their finances were taking a heavy toll. He lowered his eyes, clenching his fists to suppress the frustration building within him. "Mom, we could ask for help. Maybe there are charities or—" "No, Ethan," she cut him off softly but firmly. "We've been through worse. We'll get through this. Just focus on your studies. That's all that matters." Her voice, though weak, carried the unshakable conviction that had always defined her. But for Ethan, her words only added to the burden he already carried. After dinner, he sat alone at the table, a pile of bills spread out before him. Each amount listed felt like a cruel reminder of their reality. He had promised to protect his family, but that night he wondered how much longer he could keep that promise. The silence of the apartment, once everyone was asleep, seemed to amplify the noise of his thoughts. Ethan sat at his rickety desk, illuminated only by a flickering bedside lamp. In front of him, his class notes, filled with highlights and scribbles, were evidence of his tireless efforts. He picked up a pen, but his hand remained still. Fatigue and stress made every task feel insurmountable. He stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out before him, its flickering lights contrasting with the oppressive darkness in his mind. Sometimes he wondered if life would have been different if he had grown up in another neighborhood with different opportunities. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. Dwelling on what-ifs wouldn't change anything. Suddenly his phone vibrated on the table. A message from an unknown number appeared. "Ethan Clark, I have a proposition for you. Call me." He frowned, suspicious. But curiosity mixed with a hint of desperation won out. He dialed the number and a deep, almost solemn voice answered. "Good evening, Ethan. My name is William Carter. I know what you're going through and I believe we can help each other." Ethan felt his heart race. Who was this man and how did he know about his situation? "Tomorrow meet me at Café Royale at 10 a.m. I'll explain everything." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. He stood there, phone in hand, torn between apprehension and hope. Perhaps an unexpected opportunity had just presented itself. But at what price? Ethan sat on his bed, staring at the ceiling stained with time. The gala. The idea lingered in his mind. He had heard of these events, where well-dressed people exchanged polite smiles and business cards. It wasn't his world. But was that a good enough reason not to try? He thought back to the last conversation he'd had with his father, a few days before the accident. Samuel had said, "Son, life won't hand you anything easily. But sometimes you have to go where you feel least at home. That's where great things happen." These words still echoed, like a silent compass during difficult times. Ethan sighed and glanced at his only pair of formal shoes, worn but still presentable. He pulled them out of the closet and studied them for a moment. Maybe Jordan was right. Maybe this gala would be a chance, however small, to glimpse another reality. Saturday evening arrived faster than he expected. Dressed in his only suit, a little too tight, he felt uncomfortable as he stared at his reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. But he knew there was no turning back. Taking one last deep breath, he left the apartment, heading toward an unfamiliar world where anything or nothing could happen. The evening of the gala, Ethan donned a suit borrowed from one of his father's former co-workers. It was slightly too wide in the shoulders and a bit outdated, but clean and presentable. Standing before the cracked bathroom mirror, he nervously adjusted his tie. Caleb appeared behind him with a sly grin. "Not bad, big brother. You almost look like a businessman." Ethan laughed, though his stomach was tied in knots. The idea of mingling with wealthy, influential strangers terrified and intrigued him in equal measure. "Thanks, Caleb. And you try not to stay up too late." The journey to the event venue was marked by a heavy silence. When he arrived in front of the luxurious hotel where the gala was held, Ethan felt his heart race. The grand glass doors, bursts of laughter and glimmering crystal chandeliers were intimidating. Inside he was greeted by a radiant Jordan, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. "Ethan, I knew you'd come," he said, patting him on the shoulder. "Come on, let me introduce you to a few people." The evening progressed and Ethan mingled in the conversations, hesitant at first but gradually gaining confidence. Then everything changed when an imposing older man approached him. "You must be Ethan Clark, right? I've heard about you." The man extended a wrinkled but firm hand, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. "I'm William Carter. We need to talk." Ethan entered the mansion, greeted by a burst of light and lively conversations. The walls were adorned with paintings in gilded frames, and the crystal chandeliers cast sparkling reflections on the polished wooden floors. A server offered him a glass of champagne, which he politely declined, preferring to keep his hands free to mask his discomfort. He scanned the room, feeling like a stranger in this world of elegance. The guests, impeccably dressed, floated from group to group, exchanging laughter and handshakes. Jordan spotted him and approached with a reassuring smile. "Ethan, glad you made it. Come on, I'll introduce you to some important people." Ethan followed him, shaking hands and offering awkward smiles as Jordan listed impressive titles: lawyers, entrepreneurs, investors. Each introduction seemed to widen the gap between their worlds. But just as he started wondering if he belonged there, a middle-aged woman with silver hair and graceful poise approached him. "You're Ethan Clark, aren't you?" Ethan nodded, surprised that someone recognized him. "I'm Amelia Carter. My father, William Carter, wishes to speak with you. He's over there." She pointed to a man seated in a chair near the fireplace, holding a glass and watching Ethan with piercing eyes. With a pounding heart, Ethan crossed the room, each step echoing the possibilities of what might change that night. Ethan took a moment to study her. He hadn't noticed this woman earlier amid the evening's bustle. She exuded an aura of wisdom and dignity, standing in stark contrast to the commotion around her. "Excuse me," he said, trying to mask his discomfort. I don't really feel like I belong here." She gave him a gentle, almost maternal smile. "You're not the only one, young man," she said softly. "But sometimes, it's just about learning how to navigate this world. You seem like a thoughtful person. Who are you?" The question caught him off guard. He hesitated, searching for the right words. He wasn't used to talking about himself in situations like this. Ethan Clark, he said finally. Law student. I work part-time to help my family. The woman's eyes sparkled with interest. She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Interesting. I see. You're fighting for something, aren't you? For your family, for the future. Many of us here have forgotten where we came from. This world can offer opportunities, but you have to know how to seize them. And sometimes, it takes more than skills or connections. It takes courage. Ethan stared at her, struck by the sincerity in her words. Before he could respond, she gently handed him her champagne flute. You have a choice to make tonight, she said, her gaze intense. Don't let it pass you by. Ethan felt both captivated and unsettled by Margaret's presence. It was as if she saw beyond the surface, understanding something he hadn't realized about himself. You seem a bit lost, she said, her eyes piercing into his. That's normal. You're carrying a lot on your shoulders. But in moments like this, you must know your worth, even if this world tells you otherwise. Ethan looked at her, intrigued by her words. Her gaze was calm, yet there was a depth to it, as if she had faced far more than he could imagine. She spoke again, her tone more serious. Would you like some advice, Ethan? He nodded, his heart beating faster at the thought of what she might say. Don't let others define you by their expectations. This world has its rules, but you can rewrite some of them. If you want to make a difference, following the footsteps of others won't be enough. You'll need to dare to be different. Never underestimate the power of a bold decision. Margaret paused briefly, then added with a slight smile. Sometimes, it's the most unlikely choices that lead to the greatest opportunities. Ethan looked at her, a chill of uncertainty running down his spine. She wasn't saying this without reason. She knew something he had yet to uncover.